People of Reddit, what is your downright scariest real-life story? Years ago, in one of my first jobs, a colleague told me a story. The night before, she had gone out for some drinks, and on the way home she had got off the bus and was walking down her road to her house. A taxi pulled up alongside her and the driver told her to get in the car. She obviously said no. He then said to her, "Call whoever you want whilst you're in the car, but please just get in and I'll explain." So she got in. Turns out, walking towards her was a topless guy with no shoes on and a machete in his hand. Cab driver had already called the police, but then saw my colleague, so had stopped to look after her. This is very tame compared to a lot of this stuff on here, but when I was 12, I saw this huge man drop a dollar bill. He seemed not to notice, so I ran across the street to hand it back to him. He thanked me several times, and I could see that he wasn't right in the head. I was a pretty small girl, probably only 100 pounds at the time. This guy easily had a foot on me. All of a sudden he grabbed me by the top of my head and wouldn't let go. I am so lucky that my dad was nearby, and he pretty much just picked me up and led me away. My other friend was once walking through a parking garage late at night. There was a man in a gray hoodie lying at awkward angles in the middle of the road. She was wary of approaching him. He croaked out for help, to be driven to the hospital. She saw a grisly head wound and decided to be a good Samaritan. She offered to put his bag into the trunk, but he remained silent. He threw his black bag at his feet in the passenger seat while she very nervously got in the car. After 5 minutes in the direction of the hospital, she noticed the blood peeling, off of his face. She slowed to a stop, no traffic, and asked the man to check her back tire because she thought the car was uneven. The minute the man got out of the car, she screeched off. She drove to the police station and they examined the car. The black bag contained a butcher's knife and a garbage bag. The man was never caught. True story time. When I was about 5, my parents had just separated. I stayed with my mom in a small first-floor apartment. I had my own room, but I always slept in her bed. One hot summer night, the window above the bed was open. I woke up and saw our cat just sitting in the doorway, staring into my room. Weird, because he always slept with us. Then, he walked into my bedroom and me. I turned to wake my mom. In the few seconds it took her to sit up, we both looked back, and there was a man, standing in the doorway, coming out of my bedroom. Somehow, my mom didn't even hesitate. She grabbed me and literally threw me out the window. She jumped after me, and we started screaming until someone called 911. The police came, no forced entry, just our front door unlocked. My mom swore she had locked it with the chain and deadbolt. A week later, while cleaning, she opened the water heater closet and found a notebook full of names and drawings, a pair of gloves, and candy wrappers. The police think he was already inside, waiting for us to fall asleep.
Something weird happened to me. More scary, in a what could have been kind of way. So not on the same scale as the poor people in the comments. I was 17 years old male and walking home from a night out quite drunk and stoned, about 2 a.m. I'm in a lonely part of my walk, no people, few cars, just a road and some large shops. A, B, and Q, and a carpet showroom, out-of-town shopping complexes that have since become ubiquitous in the UK. Anyway, in a lay-by about 15 feet away is a silver car, pulled up lights on. As I stumble past, 2 men step out and call me over. Something about the situation immediately sobers me up. I keep walking, and one of them shouts, "It's fine, we are the police, we will drive you home." I stop for a moment and reply with some smart ass comment along the lines of how police would never do this and that they were dodgy. Calling them dodgy always sticks in my mind. He insists I'm too drunk and it's not safe for a young man like me and I should let them take me home. I say no, and he then tells me to come over here and listen to the police radio in the car to prove they are real police. It's weird, the guy is almost begging me. Desperation in his voice. I repeat a firm no, tell them I'm fine, and keep walking. Minute I'm out of sight, I run as fast as I can and don't relax until the 30 minutes later I'm home. I can only assume they didn't manhandle me into the car because there was the very occasional taxi driving past. I'm 45 now and occasionally think about how that could have ended for me. None of the scenarios seem good. Sadly, stories like this are probably more routine for women, but at the time it really shook me up. My GF's neighbor was brutally attacked in her home. My high school GF called late one night after I was home and in bed. She said that something had happened and asked if I could come over. She was clearly shaken and not full of details. So I told my parents and drove over towards her house. At the top of her subdivision, I was met by a cop with lights on. He asked where I was going, and I told him about the call from my GF. He lets me go by, and I come over the hill to the cul-de-sac where she lives, and I see multiple cop cars around the circle. They watch me pull up and get out of my car. My GF comes running out of her house and meets me in the street. She explains that someone had broken into her neighbor's house and started beating her with something heavy. The neighbor managed to get out of the house and headed to my GF's house, where she started banging furiously on the front door. My GF's dad was out of town, so her mum answered the door, and the neighbor just fell into the foyer, bleeding profusely from the head. Her mum looks up to see the attacker headed up the walkway towards the front door. She pulls the neighbor into the house and closes the door, hitting the attacker with it before it fully closed. He then took the heavy tool he had used to beat the neighbor and smashed the little window at the top of the door. Her mum started screaming, and the attacker just turned around and walked up the street into the darkness. I spent the night there that night, along with 2 or 3 cops outside in their cars. And in the morning we could see red marks still pooled on the floor in the foyer, and splattered dark fluids above the front door from where the attacker had swung the stained tool to smash the window. No one was ever caught or even identified. It was just completely random. The neighbor survived, and to my knowledge, had no permanent physical injuries beyond scarring from having her scalp stapled shut. She moved away shortly after the incident.
When I was in my early 20s, 2 of my friends and I went out to a club in downtown Austin. We stayed until closing, around 3 a.m., and then started walking 6 blocks to my friend's car. That's when 2 men approached us. One stayed quiet, but the other, named Roger, wouldn't leave us alone. He kept asking where the party was, touching my friend's hair, and finally grabbed my shoulders, saying I was dressed like a slut who wanted attention. He was aggressive, unstable, and it made our skin crawl. We tried to brush him off, but when one of us snapped at him, he threatened to punch me in the face. At that moment, we saw a police officer across the street and immediately walked toward him. Roger followed, cursing at us until he noticed the cop. Then his entire demeanor flipped. He smiled, apologized, and said, "I was only joking. Have a good night." By the time we told the officer what happened and turned around, Roger had completely vanished. We thought that was the end of it, until a few days later, I was at work and the news came on. A man had been arrested for murdering multiple women in the area. When his face appeared on the screen, my stomach dropped. It was him, Roger, the man who harassed us, who touched us, who followed us that night. He wasn't just creepy, he was a serial killer. One of his victims was even his girlfriend, found not far from his home. I'll never forget that chill, realizing how close we came to being his next victims. I'm a kid who likes to sleep very much, so my dad often had to wake me up as I slept through my alarm. He wakes me up the same way every time, by gently putting a hand on my shoulder, and then since I usually plead for 5 more minutes, he yanks the covers off and forces me up. So a few weeks ago, I had to get up very early to go play pickup basketball in the morning with some friends. I set my alarm the night before and went to sleep. My dad works very far away, so he often sleeps at work, 2 or 3 nights a week, and that night he wasn't sleeping at home, so I knew I had to get myself up. I eventually fall asleep, and I then wake up to a hand on my shoulder, murmur the usual 5 more minutes, and then I feel the covers yanked off me all the way off the bed. I shot up out of bed because it was habit at this point, because this is when I knew my dad was serious. I opened my eyes and it was pitch black in my room and nobody was there. I looked around and saw nothing, just the lights on my clock that said it was 2:30 in the morning. I was a little more than slightly freaked out. I asked my mom in the morning if my dad had came home, but she said no. He had stayed at work. Something woke me up in the middle of the night and yanked all the covers off my bed, but nothing was there.
My ex-girlfriend told me a story about her childhood late 1980s, when she was not even 3 years old. Her father was in the construction business, and he was supposed to go with his partners to go see about a parcel of land in a nearby town they were interested in acquiring for a project. On the morning of their departure, my ex started crying uncontrollably and just clung on to her father, asking him not to go in her toddler babble. Hay tried to pacify her, but she just wouldn't stop crying. The parents got worried and thought something might be wrong with her and decided to take her to the pediatrician. He conveyed to his colleagues, partners who had arrived to pick him up, that they can go ahead and he will join them after the doctor's appointment. Just when they returned back from the doctor's, she had quietened down and fallen asleep. Just when he was about to drive out to join his colleagues, he got a phone call that his colleagues had been in an accident with a lorry, and all of them had perished on the spot. Was it premonition? I used to deliver hotshot freight across the Great Plains, Minnesota area. One night around 2 a.m., I was hauling across North Dakota, trying to reach Montana by morning. I was delivering a particularly valuable tractor part that a farm desperately needed for the following day. I began to notice some highway hypnosis sneaking up on me, but it didn't really bother me because I'd been through it hundreds of times before. Anyone who has driven across North Dakota knows that it is incredibly flat, like really flat. There also tends to be very straight and long roads. It's somewhat easy to see things on the road that are far away, even at night. I noticed something long on the road, spanning my entire lane, approximately half a mile in front of me. I slowed down a little and prepared to move into the opposite lane, thinking it was some retread of a blown tire. As I got closer, I noticed it was two people, laying head to toe across the entire lane. I swerved into the other lane, successfully avoiding them, and came to an almost complete stop, but they didn't move, not an inch. I was just about to back up and check on them when I remembered a story that an old graybeard colleague of mine told me. He told me that in certain remote areas, people will lie down in the middle of the road and wait for a car or truck to stop and see what's going on. At that point, the road layers, along with whoever else is hiding in the nearby bushes, will beat the shit out of the driver and steal his vehicle, leaving him in the middle of nowhere. I decided not to back up, and when the two people in the road saw me put my truck back in gear and drive away, they both got up and walked toward the shop. I called the police and explained what happened, but we were so far away from civilization that I doubt anything came of it. Thanks to that old graybeard, I got to keep my truck, my job, and my teeth.
I was in India for work, staying at a fairly nice hotel. I don't do this often. I usually like to head straight to the room and order room service while watching a movie, but I decided to have a drink at the lobby bar. I had a drink on my own. There was no one else around in the bar, and I made small talk with the bartender. I ordered another drink and decided to use the bathroom. I was gone a couple of minutes, and when I got back, I noticed that my drink, Scotch and Dry, had a cloudy white rim at the top, which isn't normally there. On closer inspection, the cloudy froth was settling into a powdery residue on the side of the glass. I asked the bartender what was wrong with the drink, and he at first acted like he didn't notice anything. I was suspicious now, and kept at it until he acknowledged he saw something. I mean, it was obvious. There was this froth 2 to 3 millimeters around the glass. Then he said that it always happens, and it's nothing. I then looked him directly in his eyes and asked, "Did he put anything in my drink?" It's hard to explain, but his response, though it was no, told me everything I needed to know. So I made out like I was more curious than anything and asked him whether he would taste it. He said no and said he would pour me another. I declined and said I would drink it, but I just wanted him to tell me if it was off or not. All this while, there was this awkward vibe where we both knew the jig was up, but we were pretending like this wasn't happening. I paid up and left the drink where it was, locked and latched my door, the whole time picturing myself lying in a bath of ice, sans organs, or something even worse.